Let's talk about modernizing your outdated business practices using Power Apps, Power Automate, maybe a little Power BI, maybe a little AI, you never know. But so today we're going to do something a little bit different. So this week we ran a webinar here at PowerApps 911. It was a free one, right? Where we went and talked to people about the things that we talked to customers about. And so we decided, we kind of went through different modernizations, like processes, things to think about. We gave lots of examples. We showed off some really cool examples as well. And then at the end, we answered just a whole bunch of people's questions and talked about, what was top of mind for them to help drive it. So we thought it was such a good conversation that we would just share it here on YouTube with you as well, so you can enjoy that. Also, if you look down in the description below, there is a link to all the slides. A lot of the students wanted the slides to be able to go and share those with their leadership and their people to start making some of these decisions to get away from tech debt, legacy solutions, and solve the problems a right and scalable way. So if that sounds like fun to you, then let's switch over to the recording of that and see what it's about. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever it is, wherever you're from, and welcome to our lovely little webinar on knowing when to modernize, right? This is one of those topics that we feel very passionately about and we get to talk about a lot. And Eric is kind enough to join us today to walk us through basically a mini version of his last client engagement. So real quick, if we haven't met before, my name is Shane Young. I am the head talking head, sure, here at PowerApps 911. I do lots of the YouTube content. I also our lead trainer, run our university program, and generally am just a crazy guy who loves to talk about Power Apps, Power Automate, Copilot Studio, SharePoint, kids playing soccer too much, right? It's kind of my jam. So anyway, I am here today primarily to help kick this thing off and keep Eric out of trouble if you guys ask him any of them spicy questions that I need to jump in on. But other than that, I am joined by my dear friend, Eric. Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Eric Lott. I've been here at PowerApps 911 for almost 3 years now. I am a data architect and senior consultant. So I help build projects. I help build data relations and Dataverse and all that fun stuff. So do some of that and do some of the actual building as well.
Yeah, very cool. I'm glad I can't believe you've been here 3 years. It's time flies when we're having fun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but so as a whole right here at PowerApps 911, we do training, we do consulting, we do mentoring, we do anything related to the Power Platform. And so, like I said a minute ago, this session is really Eric's brainchild. He went on site with a customer earlier this year and spent a couple of days just talking to them about modernization and how to do better, not with just the Power Platform, but overall, like getting away from bad processes, getting away from paper and pencil, getting away from tech debt. And like they loved it so much that we thought we would just package it up and give you a mini version of what they've got so that we can hopefully share it and you guys can make some better decisions along the way. Now, speaking along the way, I'm going to throw this over to Eric in about 3 more seconds. But right, we are here, right? We're live. We are in chat, so you can definitely post questions in the chat as we go. Me and Mo will primarily be answering those in chat, or if they're bigger questions that we feel like, hey, let's redirect Eric and get him to talk about it, then I'll just interrupt Eric rudely and be like, hey, Eric, answer this question because Susie wants to know, and Eric will roll with it, right? So
that's right.
We definitely will do questions that way, and then when Eric wraps up, he has left some time at the end where we will open it up if you wanted to come. I don't know if they'll let you come off mute, but we'll do more of a just rapid fire questions and answers. And when we get to the end, it could be questions about the topics Eric's covered. It could be Power Apps, Power Automate questions, Copilot Studio, right? If you're ignoring Copilot Studio, you're missing out. So we'll have a proper Q&A session at the end, but definitely if you're going along, you want to throw questions in, please feel free to do that. And then also just tread lightly on things like, licensing and stuff like that. You're welcome to ask those questions. Remember that if we give any licensing advice, it is really just our opinion, right? Only Microsoft can give official formal licensing answers, even if I feel like, between Mo and I, we know more about licensing than they do. Just keep that in mind that, got to do that. And then the last little bit, and then I will give it to Eric, is this session is being recorded. So if you don't want to be part of the recording, don't speak. But I believe we have all your microphones muted anyway, so you can't. But just want to remind you all that this session is being recorded. Okay, Eric, I have rambled. I have said goofy things. It is now your turn to wax poetically about modernization.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Yeah, we'll just get right into it. So yeah, modernization, like Shane mentioned, I was just recently on an on-site engagement with a customer, and this is just kind of an overview of all of that. So the first thing I wanted to do was just go over, like, what do we consider a modern business today? And I define it as a business that has no blockers to take advantage of new products or features across Microsoft's product offerings. So the foundation to that is using secure and scalable data sources, which are primarily SQL and Dataverse. Those are like the main two, at least that we see here at PowerApps 911. And then there are, of course, others, but what I really want to say is what we're not talking about here is Excel and Access and even SharePoint, which has record limits on the scalability side. And the SharePoint data security model is kind of an all or nothing thing, at least out of the box. So when you think secure and scalable data, at least for me, I think of SQL and I think of Dataverse, with Dataverse being sort of the primary preference on data sources. And once you have that foundation, you can leverage tools like Power BI or Copilot to make these data-driven decisions about your business. So again, it's just all foundational stuff that's going to let you take advantage of these things, particularly Copilot agents that are really starting to come up today. And having business processes that live in a true business system, as opposed to Excel or just emails, you can then define and document those processes once they're well structured. And that will allow you to understand not just the business process itself, but the actual costs and downfalls of the business processes that you have. So tools. Most everybody here is probably familiar with the Power Platform, but just for those who may not be as familiar, I do want to mention a few of the tools that we talk about when we talk about Power Platform stuff. And those are primarily Power Automate, which allows you to automate business processes quickly with no coding experience. PowerApps, which allows you to build web applications with little coding experience. The coding that is required is very similar to Excel formulas. And then we have Power Pages, which allows you to build customer-facing web portals. And you can get started with those with a no-code approach. But in our experience, what we've seen with our customers is that at some point, you'll probably want some custom code just for formatting and branding. And then there's Power BI, which allows you to build highly visual reports with no coding experience required. For some complex data manipulation, you'll probably run into some cases where you will need to do some coding, but most of that's just drag and drop. And then Copilot, which allows you to build AI agents that not only answer questions, which is kind of the primary use case that people think of when they think of Copilot, but now with Copilot agents, we'll be able to actually complete tasks on your behalf as part of those business processes. Okay, so now let's get into modernization. I kind of defined like a broad outline of what it means to be a modernized business, but how do you find processes that are holding you back today? So as I mentioned recently, I did an in-person consultation with a large retail company. We sat down for 2 days and we just looked through their accounting department's business processes so we could help them just modernize that and boost efficiency and get out of the Excel spreadsheets, get out of the paper and pencil, and get into a true business process system. I'm going to go through my thought process during that on-site to give you some insight into how to identify really good opportunities for modernization. And the first one is just highly manual work. A major giveaway here, from what I've seen, is Excel. Excel has been around for decades, so businesses have sort of adopted it as the everything tool, everything in data entry, calculator, and then people even use it as a database. And I'll give you an example here. We had a customer is one of the largest retailers in North America. It's a huge enterprise company, and they were tracking the status of multiple remodels for their stores across the country. And they used a single Excel file, which was just shared across multiple teams on SharePoint. And so what we did for them was we imported that Excel file into SQL and we built a Power App around it. So they went from an Excel file with no real security, no data validation, and no reporting visibility that was at high risk of things like data loss. You have multiple copies lying around. Nobody knows which one the latest version is. Some people don't have access. Some people move it. And we moved that into a fully modern app that's now primed to take advantage of things like Copilot and Power BI and PowerApps. And that was just one Excel file for them in a massive enterprise of probably thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Excel files. The entire world, it seems, is propped up by Excel files floating around in SharePoint. So this is the largest one, hands down, that I've seen anytime we talk to a customer, is they have Excel and they're using it for everything. And there's really there's no security around it.
Eric, can I jump in?
Absolutely.
So somebody asked, did you end up building them a model-driven or Canvas app?
Okay, it was a Canvas app with SQL as the back end.
That was my guess. So the other thing I just want to mention is this is something that we run into a lot, right? Like Excel, we get it. I am not an Excel hater. Excel runs the world. If Excel poof and went away, I don't know, we would go back to the Stone Ages. It'd be really bad. But at the same time, as Eric's trying to say, right, we've got to identify Excel's weaknesses, right? And Excel's biggest weakness is it's really not meant to be. It's not a database, no matter how much we all use it as a database, and it doesn't really support automations. So, for example, you could say, "Oh, well, why didn't Eric you just write a Canvas app on top of that Excel file, right?" Which you technically can. But because Excel is not meant to be a database, it has problems with locking and sharing and security and it's not going to end in a solid solution. So as you start to say, hey, this data that lives in Excel, I want to put business processes, or I want to put an app around, I want to put a workflow around, I want to add automation, I want to add AI, that is a big blinking red symbol that we've got to get away from Excel right that moment, right? Because Excel, to all of Eric's points, does not work when you get away from just passing a file around. If you want to do anything more than just pass that file around, and you probably shouldn't do that, you've got to get out of Excel into SQL, Dataverse, SharePoint, Salesforce. Oh, I don't care what you go, but Excel is not the answer. So.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Sorry, just wanted to. I get really worked up about Excel as a data source. So
yeah, I know you do.
I'll be quiet.
All right. So another one is slow processes, or things that are very prone to bottlenecks. These are another issue holding companies back from modernization. A big one we see is approvals, and approvals can take on many forms. Things like time off requests, purchase approvals, file access approvals, all sorts of things. There's tons of approvals in business. And Power Automate has an approval feature out of the box that allows you to take advantage of tons of valuable approval features with really no additional work. And it just gives you all of the core benefits that you can then sort of bolt onto from there. And I have an example here that I can show you in a Canvas app. Let me know if you're still seeing the presentation. But we've got this.
Yeah, you have your app.
Get that? Okay, perfect. So we got this simple Canvas app, and what it allows me to do is create an order request. So if I click create order and I find one of my test businesses here, and we add some products to this order request, and you can see right now it says submit order. If I bump this way up, it now says submit request because I've exceeded the value of an automated approval order. So if I click submit request, what it's doing in the background is it's sending the owner of that account a Power Automate approval to basically approve that order request. And I can get there from right here if I click my approve order button. So everything you're seeing right now is built out of the box by Power Automate. We've done no additional work to this. I have my received approvals here, which we should see one pop up any second here. And then we've got our sent approvals, and we've got our history of approved or denied approvals. So here it is. It just came through. It's a new purchase order request. I can come in here. I can click this link to view the purchase order directly. It's got everything that I need right here. It also is going to send me an email saying that I got approval, which looks like it may not be here yet. But it will send me an email as well. And then right here, I just have this drop down that says approve, reject, or reassign. So this is a way to get approvals out of emails, and there it is. So here's the email as well. I can approve it, reject it directly from here. You can see that it just updated because I did it here instead. So again, this is all out of the box, and you can of course expand the functionality with Power Automate and report on the approval data in like Power BI. So all of this approval functionality in Power Automate is built on top of Dataverse. So you can leverage those Dataverse tables the way you do any other table, where you can customize them. You can build automations on top of them. You can build, business process rules. And, if you have very specific rigid approval processes that need multiple approvals or a specific order of approvals, like a hierarchy of approvals, things like that. All of that is built directly into Power Automate approvals right out of the box. So there's really no reason to have your custom approval processes. We've seen a lot of people who kind of reinvent the wheel in SharePoint, and really with tools like this, a modern business, in my opinion, should be leveraging this sort of workflow. All right. And then another process issue we see a lot is a lack of visibility into the process. So this could be reporting on the data output of the process. So things like a financial audit or a sales pipeline report. Those sort of generate data that you can report on in Power BI. But what if you need to see visibility into a business process itself? So this goes back to the foundational idea that modern business processes should be well documented and well structured, because when a process is well structured, you can add reporting directly into the process itself. I'm going to show you another example from a Power Automate tool called work queues. And work queues allow you to gain visibility into a process, whether it's a single step process or a multi-step process. They show clear separation of tasks and ownerships for each task and where each of those items are in the approval process. So I'm going to come back over here, and I think I've got it open already. Yeah. So right here on the left-hand side, you can see work queues, just like we were on approvals before. This is just a tool built directly into Power Automate. And here's my visibility. So this is giving me visibility directly into this business process, whatever it is. Right now, it's just this approvals example with some test data. But you can see I have this items tab, and I have all of these test items in here. I can see their status. They all have priorities. They can expire. They can be delayed. They can be put on hold. So you can imagine like a business process you may have, like processing a contract. As contracts come into your business, you need to process them in a specific order, or maybe you have different SLAs that determine, priority, which comes back to this column. So given that, you can basically have your business process funnel directly into this work queue, and everybody that's touching that business process can work out of the work queue. And these can be assigned to people. The statuses actually are enforced in a specific order. So this one is queued, and you can see that if I change the status, I can only put it on processing or on hold. And if it's on hold, I can only put it back to queued. And if it's processing, I can only put it as processed or an exception. And this just gives you instant visibility into sort of like a queue type business process. And then it gives you all of this reporting out of the box as well. So, how many items you have by status, average handling time, an actual, average handling time, and then you get the chart over 7 days, all that good stuff. And then there's also process mining, which I don't have an example for this, but what this allows you to do is actually record steps of a manual business process, and it will map out that business process into some really cool metrics that give you good visibility. And that's a really good way to document business processes once you have them sort of well-defined and structured. So there's a lot of tools here. You download the Power Automate desktop app, and then you can just record those steps, whether it's like a local executable running, or if it's, maybe you're in like some kind of SaaS platform, you can do all of that here.
Yeah, right. And I think, as you look at these work queues, right, like they're amazing ways to get started with this stuff, right? Especially if you have no idea what you're doing. Okay, I need to get this, happening. It's turnkey, right? Like you go in there, you kind of fill in the blanks, and you're off and running, and you've got all that rich reporting, and it really opens up doors. But also, I think it's worth noting, like if you outgrow that, or like Eric was talking about Power Automate flow approvals earlier, if you outgrow those, that's the beauty of the Power Platform. It doesn't mean you have to leave the Power Platform. You don't outgrow the Power Platform. You go to another portion, So we could go in and we could, you could build a Canvas app that did the same concept as work queues. You'd have to go build all those pieces yourself. But if you had to be able to have weird, flexible paths, or you needed to be able to, on Tuesdays, you're not allowed to put something on hold on Tuesdays for some reason. Weird requirements we get, they come up a lot. But that's the other, I think, important thing to note is that super easy way to get started, get away from that manual process, but you're not going to outgrow it. The platform will grow and expand with you. Even if you're like, okay, well, now my work queues, now we got to be able to drag and drop them. Well, I can't really do that in the tool that Eric just showed. Can't really do that in Canvas apps. Well, can you? If you got a smart guy like Eric around, he could build you a PCF control that you add in your Power App that lets you add dragging and dropping. You're off to the races, right? Like, just remember that the platform, super low barrier to entry, super exciting to get started, but you're not going to outgrow it. You're not going to be like, oh, my problem's gotten so bad, I can't do it anymore. So I don't know. I want to add a little color there. My little Power Apps is awesome sales pitch.
I like it. All right. The next process type that you should look out for is error-prone processes and processes that have compliance concerns. So this can come from manual data entry without validation. So that is going to lead to high error rates. And then compliance concerns, the first thing I always think of is mishandling personally identifiable information, or PII. So a great example of handling PII is like the insurance industry. And we've worked with insurance companies who need to store PII, like, social security numbers, first name, last name, and they need to store that to authenticate their customers when they call into their, customer service centers. And without a secure database, that's just not, I don't want to say not possible, but you definitely shouldn't do it. You don't want to be storing people's name and social security number in Excel for sure. So stuff like that definitely needs to move over to a secure database. And then with high error rates, a great example of something we've done for a finance customer is we built them an AI-powered double entry accounting app. So traditionally, double entry is performed by two separate people. They enter data from documents or wherever, and if those entries match, then we trust it. And if they don't, we do an audit and find the issue. And what we did is we built the same process, but one of the entries was performed by AI Builder. So we feed it the necessary documents, it scans the documents, finds the relevant info, and it creates the entry, and then a human comes along and does the same thing. And if they match, we trust it, and if they don't, we fire the AI Builder and tune its prompt or whatever. No, but we just do the same process. We look at the documents, we correct any mistakes, and we move on. So that literally is cutting workforce, and the same process that used to take two people now only takes one. You're doubling efficiency just by introducing AI Builder to an existing process. So again, with Dataverse, PII, that's pretty much handled by Microsoft. They have row level security and field level security. So if you have customers calling in and you need to authenticate the last four of their social, there's ways to mask data in Dataverse so that it's, you can store the whole social security number, but only display the last four to only the users that need it. So if you're a contact center employee, then you have specific security roles that give you access to the last four digits of a particular field. So that's how granular Dataverse gets. So that's something to really keep in mind with compliance concerns. And then Microsoft has a whole suite of tools specifically devoted to compliance as well, which we won't get into right now, but just something to keep in mind. All right. And the last business process that I want to take a look at is processes that don't scale. And I'll just give an example from our own internal CRM QuickBooks integration. I'm gonna do a quick demo of this one too, because this is always fun to show off. So this is our test. Yeah, this is our test CRM. So when I go in as a consultant or architect, whatever I'm doing, and I need to bill time to a customer, this is how I do it. And this is what it looks like. So I come in here and I select an account. I will do QuickBooks Testing LLC. And then that filters down the project for a QuickBooks project. And I'll just do, actually, real quick, I'll show this off. So this goes back to sort of the error handling and stuff. If I try to do 25 hours in one day, that of course is too many hours. So there's some error handling built right into there. And if I try to save that, it's just not going to let me save it until I fix it. So I actually meant 2.5, and now it lets me save. So with the processes that don't scale, what we did is we identified with our CRM a highly manual process that was prone to errors and absolutely would not scale, and we automated it. So with a timesheet, if I go to the approval status and I approve it, what it's going to do is it's going to kick off a Dataverse plugin, and it is going to make an API request over to QuickBooks Online, and it's going to grab the ID from the account, which is the customer, grab the ID from the project. It's going to get my hours and my description, and it's going to automatically create a timesheet in our QuickBooks sandbox here. So before we did this, we had somebody at PowerApps 911 that would go to each individual timesheet and copy that data from the timesheet entries into QuickBooks, and it took hours. I think it was basically an entire day process. So if we hire 10 more consultants, what happens? That workload goes up dramatically, and it goes from a one-day process to a two-day process. But now with this, it's integrated directly into QuickBooks. So it doesn't matter if we hire 100 more consultants, they just write directly to QuickBooks once they're approved. So this, again, just going back to that foundational idea of, creating well-structured processes. This is a really good example of something that just works really well, and it's just something that cannot be done if you're working either directly in QuickBooks, right? Because they don't give you the same tools as the Power Platform does, but it's also not possible if you're working in Excel or, we were working in SharePoint before we moved to Dataverse. So all of this is possible because we took on the time and effort to move to Dataverse, to build it right, and now we're able to leverage tools like this.
And this, right, like just to add color to that, right? Like that was a really big moment in PowerApps 911's history, right? Like, 'cause we had different timesheet apps along the way, and getting out of this process of a human literally copying and pasting things over and over, and the mistakes that came with that, it was challenging to do, right? Like, I don't want you all to think, oh, in 5 minutes, Eric hopped on there and clicked some buttons and did this. It took him what, weeks?
It took
of work?
months. Well,
Months.
the QuickBook, it was weeks. Yeah.
Right, because he ended up having to learn some new tech. Right, there's some different Dataverse stuff behind the scenes that we had to integrate. Like, there was a lot that went into that, and like when we sat on the outside, like, surely it's easy. It was not, and like we kind of kept putting it off. But that is the type of stuff that we as a company, we invested, and now we can scale to this. The cows go home, come home. I don't know. Buddy's making me petty right now. But it was worth the effort. But we had to be brave. Eric had to go learn new tech. Had to go count on Dataverse to do some things that we didn't know Dataverse could do. But now he's got these validations in there. Like, he showed you the simple ones. He's even got validations kind of for the saving portions. There's a lot under the hood there.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody said, how scary is the QuickBooks Online API, Eric? How scary was that API?
Not as scary anymore, but yeah, it's a beast. It's old. It's a very old API.
Christina, you've got a great question there. We're going to hold that one until we'll let Eric finish up, but we will come back to that question. That's a great question. So sorry, go ahead, Eric. I wanted to make sure they understood it. What a profound business impact you doing that had for PowerApps 911.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good segue into here. So hopefully you have some profound, use cases that came out of this. Hopefully during those examples, there were some processes at your company that, need some attention, and you maybe thought about some of those as we went through some of those examples. So one thing to keep in mind is you don't have to go from 0 to 100 all at once. Even at PowerApps 911, the stuff that, we demoed today and the stuff we talked about with QuickBooks integration, all that, like, there's still some stuff we do. We still use Excel from time to time. We're still in SharePoint for some things, but you don't have to go from 0 to 100 all at once. You can start by, replacing one Excel file and let that prove the value of modernization. You can use that to, justify some of the cost of ownership with, licensing and technical debt and things like that. I put some considerations together on this slide just to talk about the benefits that you'll see once you've modernized a business process. So the first is just data migration and security. Getting your data out of something like Excel into Dataverse introduces a ton of data features that you can use. A lot of the ones we talked about today, like the approvals and the work queues, you'll be able to show people exactly what they need to see and hide the stuff that they don't need to see. So this has been huge for us since migrating our CRM to Dataverse. We can store all of our data in one place, and the PM team has their data, the consulting team has their data, the sales team has their data, and all of that is just kind of driven off of the security. Next is just short and long-term forecasting. So we haven't talked specifically today about really like Copilot and AI. We touched on it a little bit, but it's probably the primary driver to businesses wanting to modernize at the moment. So the first step of getting to use Copilot agents and a lot of these AI productivity tools is getting your data in a place that's structured so that you can point an agent to it and, have it do stuff in Dataverse, or have it, answer questions about some of your data or customers or whatever that looks like for you. And by modernizing, you're not only getting your business process in a healthier place, but you're setting yourself up to take advantage of new products and things like that coming down the line, like Copilot. So Definitely you want to get in a place as soon as possible to take advantage of that. And then there's technical debt and ALM. ALM is application lifecycle management. Uh, so technical debt, it doesn't just go away. All of the processes that we talked about, modernizing, that was technical debt. Our manual entry from our CRM into QuickBooks, that was technical debt. And we finally paid that debt by spending the time to automate that process. And now we have a QuickBooks integration that we can do other things with just by, getting that single process modernized. It kind of got our foot in the door to do other things with the QuickBooks integration. Application lifecycle management, or ALM, it's an important component to a modern business. It's something you'll take advantage of after you really get to a more like modernized place. So we haven't really gone too deep into ALM in this webinar, but I'll just give you like a quick example with our CRM. Like I was able to, pull this up. We have a dev, a test, and a prod CRM. So that's kind of like the ALM lifecycle. We do all of our development in dev, we test it in test, and then we push it to prod. So that, of course, is not something you can do in SharePoint. It's not something you can do in Excel. That's a really, really powerful tool that you get when you move to something like the Power Platform. And then last is user experience and productivity. Users, for the most part, love having things that just work. Some people are a little resistant to change, and we've seen that firsthand. We see that a lot. But ultimately, with the Power Platform, one of the things I really early on loved about the Power Platform is it allows you to build custom applications around your existing process. So it just makes sense to your users. You don't have to redefine how you do your business. You don't have to re-educate people on certain things. What you do is you take the business process that you're doing today and you build intuitive tools around it so that people are just more productive and generally happier, hopefully. So that's been a huge factor in what we do for our companies. And that's all I got. So I see a lot of questions in the chat.
Yeah. I'll jump in here for you. There's a lot
Okay.
going on over there. So the first question, and I'll take a stab at this one and let you chime in if you want.
Okay.
Christina asked, is there an ideal data source in your opinion? Very loaded question, right?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to consider. So from an architectural standpoint, if you're in something like SQL, there's nothing wrong with staying in SQL. SQL offers a lot of the data structure and security that Dataverse does. Dataverse is built on top of SQL. Dataverse is really just a product built on top of SQL that gives you a nice little, user interface to build all of those relationships and stuff like that without messing with SQL itself. So SQL is good, but I think Dataverse is better because when Microsoft introduces something new, the very first thing it's going to support is Dataverse. That's almost always the case. SQL is the primary thing about SQL is it's so hard for companies that are ingrained in SQL to get out of SQL. So to me, it doesn't really justify the cost of migrating out of SQL because you typically have you may have a team of database administrators. You may have a whole lot of people that support that SQL, and it would just be a large migration to push that to Dataverse. Now, if you have like a small SQL database, like part of our CRM migration was moving some timesheet data from SQL over to Dataverse, and that's no big deal. I think that's justifiable. But if your whole company, if you're like working at like a 50-year-old company that's been using SQL for forever, and you've got decades worth of data, and maybe it just makes more sense to do like a virtual table into Dataverse. But when it makes sense to build new stuff on top of that, I always try to use Dataverse, almost always. So SQL and Dataverse to me are sort of on par, depending on context. If all else is the same and we're just starting something from scratch, Dataverse is the way to go.
I would agree with that. I would say, yeah, right. Like, and I think to me, it's a 1A, 1B, like clean slate. I think Dataverse is the best, right? If you've got SQL, it may or may not be worth jumping over there. But yeah, and then it's also worth noting, right, both Dataverse and SQL, they make the app premium, right? So that does have a different license coming into the equation. And so there are a lot of people that use SharePoint as their data source, right? SharePoint is great. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, yeah, like the thing we hear about SharePoint all the time is that it's free, and access to SharePoint is free. But really what you're doing is you're just paying that on technical debt. As your data grows, look at what you're building on SharePoint and say, where is this going to be 5 years from now? Are we going to outgrow SharePoint? Because now SharePoint was free, but now you're going to have to consider migrating that into Dataverse. What does that look like? That's sort of the consideration with SharePoint. Is it's great for stuff that you just need to spin up, especially if licensing is an issue. But yeah, always consider growth and consider the migration implications of that growth, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely think that's important. And like where a lot of people run into problems with SharePoint is it's something called delegation, right? So if you all aren't comfortable with the terminology of what is SharePoint, what is delegation in PowerApps, if you can't answer that question at the moment, then you probably should not. Like my one video says, right? It's irresponsible to build PowerApps. You've got to understand delegation. If you understand delegation, then that helps you understand what Eric's alluding to there, where the points are where you're going to outgrow SharePoints, things like the search function and different options around that and scale and performance. So understanding delegation will help you better understand the answers that Eric just gave us there. Someone asked, so if I make an app and use Dataverse, all the users have to have a premium account? Yes, when Power Platform licensing is tied to the user of the app, not the creator. So Eric doesn't need a premium license to make a Dataverse app, but if he shares it with me and Buddy and Mo, then me, Buddy, and Mo all needs a premium license to use his app because it has Dataverse. So it's not about the maker, it's about the users. How scalable is Dataverse in terms of storage?
So there is a limit for sure. But I mean, compared to SharePoint, it almost feels like there's not a limitation. I've seen companies that have millions of records in Dataverse with really no issue. Since it is built on top of SQL, there's really only theoretical limits to how much data you can store in SQL. The thing that you're going to run into before the data limits are, you might see some slowness. Dataverse does a really good job of indexing all of your data automatically. So there's options like when you create new columns and things like that, if they need to be indexed for search, things like that. So handles all of that really well. But yeah, how scalable? I would say very, very scalable without giving specific numbers. Much, much more than SharePoint, for sure.
For sure. All right, sorry, I missed one earlier that I want to jump back to. And I'm actually going to call Mo for this one. Mo, someone had asked about how do you like to determine if it's worth the time to automate, especially when the ROI might be over a year. So as our primary solution advisor here that loves to have these conversations, bestow your wisdom upon these fine folks around that.
Oh my gosh, these are my favorite conversations because with all things, it depends. And so there's a lot of things you need to consider. And I know I was seeing some really great conversations in the chat about this is only something that I do for an hour every month versus a task that you're doing every day. there are a lot of things to consider. How much time does it take for you to do it? How reliable is that the current and existing process? So it's not just the cost of entering that data in, it's the cost of preparing that data. If something's wrong, fixing that data, all the rigmarole of the emails around it. Then the other things that we want to consider are, what are the ongoing costs of your automations? And that's a conversation I have regularly. And sometimes I get really sad when I talk to folks who haven't thought about that part. Is it's not just about replacing the thing, it's about what is the end state after we have built the thing. So what do I need to support my solution once it's in place? And what do my leaders and other stakeholders need to be aware of? That I'm going to be offline every few months to update if we're talking AI, my learning models, or I'm going to be paying premium licensing for these users, but because I only need some of these users to view this data, we're also going to do some Power BI reports. Let's make sure that's in there. So it's about the cost to the business of how much time it takes to enter that data, the existing reliability of that data, and the cost of maintaining that process. We really have to think about all of those. But then there's one more, and Eric hit on this, but I'm going to highlight again. We also have to consider the risk that your organization is incurring by maintaining some of these processes, especially when we're talking about modernization in older solutions, access databases, some of the older versions of SharePoint, right? There may or may not have been some issues with that. If we're not using the most current solutions and the solution you're using is unsupported, if something happens for some organizations, that can be catastrophic. And so that is a cost we have to consider, taking a look at what risks are we incurring and what is the level of that risk. When you're using something unsupported, especially, you have to consider that as a high risk thing if it's an enterprise level solution. And if you don't know what enterprise level means, it means that everybody's relying on that tool to work, and it's housing information that is critical to your operations.
There you go. That is, yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another question we had here, right? We have a few more minutes. So a couple of different people along the way asked about virtualizing. So in Dataverse, you can do what's called a virtual table, where you hook up SharePoint or SQL behind the scenes and it's exposed via Dataverse. So my opinion, and we'll give Eric a chance to chime in on these as well, but I am not a fan of virtual tables. Right, we find there's just a bunch of little goofiness with them. There's little rules you gotta know here and there. And overall, like, yes, they let you then build a model-driven app on top of a virtualized SharePoint table, but it just feels like one of those I can't think of the word, Rugoberg, those machines that are crazy with all the pieces, and like it's never going to come together very well. So that's the way that I think about it. I don't know. I'm not a fan. Eric, thoughts on virtual tables?
Yeah, I agree. We avoid them when possible, just from like architecture. We try not to pull those in when we can, if it's avoidable.
Cool. All right. So different question, Eric. So how do people? How do you evolve from a single developer to a team developing and maintaining apps? Like they want to do more with Power Platform. What is Martin going to do?
Yeah, I think we touched on ALM a little bit. So application lifecycle management, that's going to be a big part of it. So when we do development internally for like our CRM, for example, we have a few different people who touch different components of the CRM. So one thing you'll definitely want to learn is solutions, like managed and unmanaged solutions, how solutions move from environment to environment, things like that. And then there's also this Git integration that's maybe a little off in the horizon right now, but I could definitely see that being a big part of ALM. and then the Power Platform pipelines, so shipping changes from one environment to the next. Those are really key components of working with a team in the Power Platform.
How do you feel about co-authoring, right? I know that earlier this year they released this idea that two people could be editing the same Canvas app at the same time. Like, to me, that feels dicey and awkward and like not useful, but I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. I've had mixed results. We don't have too many cases here where we need multiple people to be in a Canvas app at the same time, just because of the way we sort of structure projects with like a primary consultant, and we sort of delegate responsibilities. So I don't know. I've done it a couple times with mixed results, I guess.
I think that's a fair evaluation. What are the advantages of Dataverse as a CRM versus other third-party CRMs like Zendesk, Salesforce, etc.?
I think a lot of it just comes from like, where is your business rooted? Like, I think a lot of the people we deal with are Microsoft shops. They're just, Outlook, Teams. It's just kind of a natural adoption to go with Dataverse or even Dynamics. A lot of people have sort of a Dynamics background. I don't have a ton of experience with Salesforce, and I have no experience with Zendesk, so I can't really speak to like advantages of Dataverse over those. But I will say that the tools that are Dataverse adjacent are super powerful. So like, if you look at the Power Platform holistically with Dataverse as sort of the in the center of that universe, then you get Power Automate and PowerApps and Power Pages and Power BI and Copilot and all that stuff. I don't know if Zendesk and Salesforce have an equivalent. I'm pretty sure they don't, but you get the whole Microsoft ecosystem. So I don't know if I've ever seen a customer that just uses Dataverse and then they have like, Google Cloud or AWS or things like that outside. Typically, what we see is these people come from the Microsoft world, and that's where they're going to keep their data.
Eric, I think this is a really interesting one because I get to have this conversation all the time. I talk to people about the solutions they're weighing.
Oh, yeah.
The conversation I usually have is, you need to understand the features and the workflows of your team and what your team needs. How custom is that versus how are you making use of industry standards? If you're going to purchase Sales Desk, if you're going to purchase Zendesk or any of those solution software, those organizations are using best practices in industries to improve and manage those solutions. It can be really powerful. It's also super expensive, and that can be a huge factor to deciding whether or not it's going to be a right fit for you. The other thing that you have to consider is the management. If you're going to create a system, and I love the system we have, there is so much customizability. There's so much nimbleness. My husband constantly complains about having to contact developers for a feature and waiting for a year to see it, and then they charge them additional money for that feature. You don't have to worry about that in building your own, in using some of these Microsoft tools, but you are paying for it in a different way. You are making sure that you have experts on your team who are, working and making sure that it can be responsive to your business needs, or you have some really good partners that you can call on to help you in those emergency situations where something's funny and you need to get it working or fix it now. It doesn't happen all the time, but you have to have that plan in place, and that is part of that maintenance cost. It's not just a small solution, it can be those larger, big solutions. So look at those features, look at those costs, and then think about what you want to invest in terms of innovating.
All right, we are getting to the end here. Real quick, someone asked thoughts on Dataverse for Teams. I will tell you that as a company, we have had very, very little success with Dataverse for Teams. It has all of these little gotchas, all these little things that it doesn't do. The security model is not as robust, but at the same time, I will tell you that I do know of enterprises that have used it and been happy with it. But for us, like, when it first was coming out, I had it when it was in alpha and beta and no one else knew about it. I thought it was going to change the world. I thought, oh my goodness, every project we ever do will be on Dataverse for Teams. We did a couple and they didn't work out very well, and we haven't really went back. It's not just, it just has so many little gotchas. We've not had a lot of good luck with that one. So hopefully that helps someone. There's some other ones, some bigger questions down here. Here, we'll leave with this one. And those of you that we don't get to your bigger questions here, we'll try to shoot you an email with a response. But we want to be respectful of everyone's time. The last one, Eric, do you have a succinct, hard-hitting headline that you use to give business leaders to convince them to invest in Dataverse?
Oh, man. This may be a Mo question. I can see her grinning.
I'm going to give her a chance too, but you're on the clock.
Yeah,
give me elevator pitch.
I would say there's really no more intuitive or better way to store business critical data than Dataverse. There's just no substitution from anything else I've seen.
Fair enough. Mo, what is your answer? Because I know you've answered this question 100 times.
Absolutely, I haven't. And my answer actually comes from, one of my colleagues. I learn from you all every day. Dataverse, Microsoft, it is their premier database solution. And Microsoft, when they are building against and improving solutions, PowerApps, Power Automate, adding functionality, they're doing a Dataverse first. They're testing it. They're supporting it. It is a solid foundation for what it is that you're building, and you can build there with knowing that you are part of a whole community that is benefiting from it, and Microsoft prioritizes it. That is a really great thing for a lot of people, because you don't want to move from access, unsupported and potentially dangerous, and then 5 years later have to move again. You want to know what you're building can be built. You can have some quick wins, and then you can iterate and improve and continue to focus on your business and not your software.
Put the simple way that I put it, right? Microsoft wants Dataverse to be the center of the universe. It's probably going to win at the end of the day. So investing in Dataverse can't go poorly. All right, so we're going to wrap up here. There are a few questions here. We will try to answer those, I guess, in a little conversation and email. I just want to get everyone out on time like a good little boy. Right, keep in mind here at PowerApps 911, we've got private training, we got live training, we got on-demand training, right? Spending more time with me. Who doesn't want that? We also do mentoring. So if you just need, a buddy to help you ask these questions and answer them in an intelligent way, we have that. We have virtual team member where you buy packages of hours, and then you can use that time, and we can do full scale projects, right? You get to hang out with Mo, and she will help you come up with a wonderful full solution of everything you want to build. And then a smart architect like Eric will end up leading your project and making sure that you're building something that is modern, that is future proof, that does scratch all the itches both today and in the future. So really appreciate it. Great job today, Eric. You guys wouldn't have known it, but this is like one of Eric's first presentations like this. So kudos to Eric today. So thank you. Thank you to Mo for putting this on, right? Mo made all this happen. There's a lot of logistics that go behind the scenes to take care of this. She'll also be the one that does all the follow-ups. Well, all those answers I just promised you. I just threw that on her plate, not mine. And then finally, just thank you all for supporting us here at PowerApps 911. Right? All your love helps us keep making free content like this, the free content we put on YouTube, the free content on training.poweraapps911.com. So with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.